and would like to invite the panelists for Early Unicorn panel up on the stage. So first up, we'll introduce the Early Unicorn panel. In the Early Unicorn session, we explore startups that have transformed themselves into billion-dollar giants. Indian startup ecosystem with over 11 billion USD raised in 2023 alone is a global leader, hosting over 100 unicorns valued at around 340 million USDs. While IITs have been a significant contributor to these unicorns, we have a lot of other people as well who've struggled and built their own brands, truly proving the fact that innovation knows no boundaries. A key factor in this transformation is mentorship. And that mentorship is very much needed for early stage startups with the guidance and the network to execute strategies in a way that Rakshit sir just demonstrated for all of us. Scaling effectively is also a challenge that a lot of our unicorns face. So that's something that we will touch upon today. This session aims to celebrate the innovation resilience and mentorships that drive startups at a grassroots level and their journey of becoming a unicorn, because success truly is more of a journey than a destination. So let's dive in. I'd like to start by inviting Mr. Mayank Kumar from Upgrad onto the stage. Okay. Mayank Kumar is the co-founder and MD of Upgrad, Asia's largest skilling and workforce development company with over 10 million learners. With nearly a decade of experience in the education sector, he has channeled around 1 billion USDs of investment across emerging markets in the world. An alumni of IIT Delhi and ISB Hyderabad, he has held roles at Pantheon Group and Tata Strategic. Recognized as Economic Times 40 Under 40 Achiever 2023, he is committed to advancing a lifelong learning globally. Sir, you might not remember me, but I was present on the day you launched Upgrad back in Noida, and I was the person who facilitated that session as well, as a second or third year student. I don't remember. Yeah, so we had a book signing by Ronnie Screwwala that day, and I remember meeting sir that day. I looked very different, you looked very different, but it's just a but it was just a very full circle moment, and I recognized you the moment I saw you just. Great. Cool. Next up, we have Miss Naiyya Saggi. I hope I pronounced her name correctly, ma'am. Thank you. She's a Harvard Business School graduate of 2012, a Fulbright Tata scholar, and a qualified lawyer from National Law School, Bangalore. With extensive experience across health tech, consumer tech, and SaaS, she founded Baby Chakra, India's leading parental platform, and co-founded the Good Glam Group, India's first DTC unicorn. Those who are not familiar with Good Glam Group, I'm pretty sure women in your house are. Just go back and ask them. As an angel investor and board member, she mentors startups. And she's also served at THFI, and as well as she's a McKinsey alumni as well. I would like to welcome you to stage, ma'am. Okay. Okay, we've left the center stage for our star moderator. Okay. Next up, completing the panel, I'd like to invite Mr. Rizwan Koita, who's the chairperson of NABH, India's leading healthcare accreditation body. A serial entrepreneur, he co-founded Citrus Tech, a $2.4 billion healthcare tech leader, and Transworks, one of India's first BPOs. He's an IIT Bombay and NIT alumni. He leads digital health and NGO initiatives through his foundation. He's also a recipient of TIE's Hall of Fame and IIT Bombay's Distinguished Alumni Award. I'd like to welcome you to stage, sir. Okay. With that, we formally announce the Early Unicorns panel discussion open. Over to you, Rizwan, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much for very nice introductions of all three of us. And it's quite a pleasure. Thank you to Pan IIT for hosting us here today. I really appreciate that. And it's very interesting if you look at the panel, although you see the names of the three companies, in a very interesting way, if you look at all our three backgrounds, we have just transitioned to doing something outside of the unicorns that we've been associated with, right? So I'll request Naiyya and Mayank to talk about the two new initiatives they've been into. And personally, I started and ran Citius Tech for 17 years, and about 3 years back, I actually stepped down to run my foundation. So in some ways, the experiences that we'll be sharing are going to be unbiased and honest. And I always worry in the world of ChatGPT that it's very hard to give any wisdom which is not otherwise very easy to find at the click of, just opening an app and finding that. So hopefully today's session, we will keep it honest, we will keep it simple, and you will learn a few things which otherwise you may not be able to pick up on, ChatGPT or whatever platform that you are using. We'll do that, and we'll also keep enough time for Q&A. So if you guys have any open, honest questions for any one of us, then feel free to ask. Yeah. So with that, I'm going to start by basically, opening this up to all three of us. That if you look at any company, and we are going to talk about unicorns today, which is the panel. But in reality, when you start any organization, you don't often think of, oh, I'm going to start a unicorn. You just think of starting a company. And then you kind of meander your way through, many different things that you do before you kind of get to a point where you say, hey, by the way, this seems to be working and let me focus and double down on that, right? So maybe, Naiyya, I start with you and, in your entrepreneurial journey, if you could share sort of how you sort of meandered your way through doing what you're doing, and then I'll ask Mayank to share his views as well. Yeah. So over to you, Naiyya.
First of all, it's a real pleasure to be here. Rizwan, it's amazing that you're putting us all together, and we're going to be talking on our new journeys as well through this session. You're so right about the whole point on meandering, because that's really, when I look back, what my life has been. I was a lawyer, went to McKinsey, did healthcare at McKinsey, went on to HBS, had this, it was a very interesting time at HBS where I was seeing what was happening back in India, the whole sort of data device, digital democracy. But at the same time in the US, Uber had just launched. We pressed a button and this beautiful black magic car would show up. So it was a very interesting time to kind of think about how you could really create large, meaningful companies and impact at scale using technology. And move back to India to start my first company, Baby Chakra. The whole belief that I've had, and to summarize a long story short, it's been 10 years in the ecosystem building. To summarize 3 learnings, one has been that, there's this big belief that entrepreneurs starting off in 2015, 2016 had, but I think is seeing and being played out now, is that Indian entrepreneurs can build globally defining companies from India for the world. And that is a belief we started building Baby Chakra out with, building a maternal and child app company from India, but that would be a globally defining product, and we saw that journey play out to a large extent. The second belief that I've seen play out through the entrepreneurial ecosystem in my journey as well is that there is a lot of amazing talent in India on engineering, design, hardware, manufacturing now. And I think it's India's time that's to come in these segments, right? We've largely been pretty much like a back office to the world in many of the plays we've done. But can we play on the front foot on, I think, these elements going forward? And that's really what my next venture is about. And then the third piece to it is a lot of entrepreneurship is serendipity. When I was building Baby Chakra, I wasn't really building for it to become a unicorn from get-go. I merged into MyGlam. I had 3 term sheets beginning of COVID. They fell through. Acquisition offer from MyGlam, joined MyGlam as a co-founder. We became a beauty and personal care unicorn in 2021. And that was that journey, right? It wasn't a planned, it was more of a serendipitous journey. And now was a time when it felt right and very serendipitous for me to be building out my third venture, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing today. So I think when we look back, everything is not super strategic. It is meandering. It's a beautiful way to describe this.
Mayank?
Yeah, so little different. So so you are right that nobody starts by saying that, look, you want to build a unicorn. And I remember one of the conversation before starting Upgrade, I was sitting, I think, before that event that the lady mentioned. So a friend of mine asked me, what are you looking at building? And look, for me, I was just been in education, so education was a passion, so I only wanted to do something in education space. So for the lack of better word, I did not have any option to do anything beyond education. So that was a passion, I wanted to do something there. And he asked me, what are you looking at building? I said, look, that time, I remember it was 2014-15, there used to be 3 to 4 unicorns at that point of time. So there was Flipkart, there was Paytm, InMobi, and I think Snapdeal and others were sort of coming in. I told somebody that, look, my first outcome is I will build $1 billion company. And my plan B is to build a $900 million company. And I said this with not for chasing unicorn, but my point was that, look, when you are getting into the journey, one should not get in with a plan B in mind. I think the plan B is to make the company successful, and plan A is to make the company successful. And that time, perhaps it was coming up. So while I did not start with the thought process of building a unicorn, but I put myself that mandate that, look, if you have to do it, your plan A has to be a success, and plan B also has to be a success, because the moment all of us start with some amount of plan B at the back of our mind, we have an escape route. So I think one of my bigger learning, adding to what Naiyya said, was when starting up, don't start with a second plan in the backup, because the backup plan never works out. And I completely agree with Naiyya that, look, it's a series of accidents that lead to something. And none of these things are planned, but you lead to one accident, to another accident, to another accident. When the accidents happen, these are accidents. In hindsight, they become strategy. So I think sometimes you do the things as execution, and if it works out good, it's strategy. If it does not work out good, it's all bad execution. So I think founders take the blame for that, and that's how people sort of end up building something unique and meaningful. But in the process, Rizwan, I just want to leave with last one point, that whatever happens, because you will have more bad days than good days, and I think on the bad days, the long-term vision of what you're building, the problem that you're chasing will actually keep you steady and will not let you sort of meander and do something very strange and very different altogether. So I think just to be steady at being persistent at the final goal does matter a lot in the larger scheme of building things.
This also explains why Mayank is going to be running the full marathon shortly in Mumbai. So you know where that drive comes from. Yeah. If I were to answer the question for myself, I used to be at McKinsey as well for many years as a management consultant before I left to become an entrepreneur. And the first company I started was in the BPO space. It was a company called Transworks. Interestingly, it was actually acquired by the Aditya Birla Group, way back in 2003, 2004. And the reason we started the company because we saw a lot of potential. And about 3-4 years into the business, and the business was actually doing well. From a startup, we had become about almost 1,700 people doing BPO work. I somehow felt that while there was a lot of revenues we could clock in the BPO space, the quote-unquote value creation opportunity for a company, especially with the ownership that we have, we were venture capital funded, was not the right one. And we exited the business in 2004, which enabled us to then start Citius Tech in 2005, right? So in a sense, I did start another company, and by several metrics, it was a successful company. But I could see that it would never really scale because of certain inherent problems in the BPO industry, where the ability to charge a premium or to be able to do very interesting things was rather limited. And focusing on healthcare technology, we can talk separately about why healthcare, but essentially just moved away from stopping doing what we were doing and almost gave it a restart in trying to do something completely different, enabled us to be able to build a much more successful company than the first company ever would have. And honestly, if we had tried to straddle both, then that would probably not have worked. So exiting something which was not working, although it was modestly successful, and then trying to do something, completely different, but in a slightly more wiser way, because, when you do something once, you've learned a few things, and those capabilities become very relevant to, increasing the odds of doing it well, the second time around. Yeah. The next question I have for the panel is that, when you're starting a company, there are few things that you do which are need to be unconventional, or something different than what you saw in the market. Could you describe, maybe I'll start with Mayank here, describe what is the unconventional, or what are the things that you try to do different to be able to differentiate yourself versus perhaps many other companies or products that were out there in the market? Yeah.
No, it's a good point. And I read, at that time I was reading a book by Peter Thiel, which had come out, which said, what is the one truth that you believe in that nobody else believes in? And it was very counterintuitive for me. And then I thought a lot about what is that I believe in that nobody else will agree to me on. And I think at that point of time, I don't know if you guys remember 2013-14, there was this era of MOOCs. And MOOCs used to be massive open online course, and people were sort of building billions of dollars, millions of dollars of sort of building MOOCs. And I think 2021, New York Times said it's a year of MOOCs. 2022, they said it's, sorry, 2001, they said year of MOOCs, or 2008-9, year of MOOCs, 2010, death of MOOCs, and 2011-12, it was resurgence of MOOCs. So for me, at that point of time, when MOOCs was the most hyped word, my sort of insight, or my bringing, my truth that I believed in that nobody else believed in, was that just putting content on a great technology platform is not going to create education, and outcomes matter. And education is not like Netflix and chill. I don't think anybody of you can sit down and watch Python 101 or Economics 101, binge watch it. But if you get an option to binge watch the Game of Thrones newest episodes or the newest season, you will sit down and watch it throughout. So education is a very highly cognitive, load-driven mechanism. And therefore, I jokingly used to say that it's like eating vegetable. Till your mother slaps you to eat vegetable, you never want to eat vegetable on your own. And that's what education was. So I think bringing that human touch element along with the technology and access is what we wanted to differentiate in the market. We said that we'll provide a coach or a mentor who will constantly follow up, who will name you and shame you. Naiyya, you paid so much money and you are not studying. To a certain extent that we were reaching out to the kids and the spouse, stating that, look, Rizwan is not studying and doing the homework, so why don't you push, and then your kids will come and say, look, Dad, if you're not doing the homework, I will also not finish my homework. So I think we learned that education, it takes a village to teach somebody, and that was the unique insight that we were trying to build and at that point of time in Upgrad. So we took a slightly different stance in the MOOCs ecosystem with that insight that without human touch, education is just content library, and we did not want to be in the business of library. We wanted to be in the business of education.
Naiyya?
Many, there's a belief I live my life by, which is that products and people win not when they do things better, but when they do things different. And it's really like, it's my life belief. We've lived this from the very beginning. And so I think one decision I'd love to lead us through is a decision in 2015 when you're building Baby Chakra. And that was sort of the app economy, the consumer app economy, the stuff around. There was a lot of hype around how apps can do great performance marketing, the conversion funnels were being discussed, threadbare amongst founder groups and performance marketer groups, etc. And we took a really bold decision to say that we would not do performance marketing for Baby Chakra. And to give you a sense, at our peak across our app and our site, we had about 25 million mothers and 10,000 doctors. Right? So the journey to that was a very different journey than a regular performance marketing journey. And that was led in the back of three things. One is, of course, and I know we've said this may not sound very counterintuitive, but genuinely sitting and focusing on product and user journeys. And so much so that my engineers, many of whom were from the IITs themselves, so I'm very, very grateful for them to, taking a bet on somebody who just come back from the US and was building something here. But we would actually sit with mothers in their homes, follow them the whole day, sit with doctors, understand how we could do stuff, how could we make the best product for best health outcomes for mothers at scale and for care providers at scale, right? So I think that was this one piece, really, really deep consumer obsession and saying we will not pay to get that consumer's love and loyalty and trust, more importantly. The second thing we did was actually we partnered with our competitors. So what does that mean? I had the privilege. So at that point in time, Facebook pages and Facebook groups, parenting and health were the largest communities on Facebook and clear competitors to an app like Baby Chakra, which is a community app in itself. And I had the opportunity, Facebook had called me to meet Mark Zuckerberg one-on-one to talk about how we were building out these large communities, amazing experience. And, we were always a little bit on the edge, what can we discuss with him, what can't we, where is this going, etc. But here's what we said, obviously they have all the infinite money in the world. We've raised a brilliant total of $5.5 million in our lifetime. So what do we have to lose? So we said, okay, there was this lovely growth hack we were doing because we were all about growth hacks, which is building out services pages, right? Because the entire mom-baby ecosystem on services across pediatricians, play schools, daycare, etc., it was completely broken. You couldn't figure out what was hyper-localized to yours. And we were building out services reviews. Now, to build out services reviews at scales, we were doing our UGC, etc., but we said, how do we accelerate that pace? So we actually did a partnership with the Facebook Pages team, the product team in the US, where Facebook Pages reviews of different services, right? If it's a play school, there were already reviews populated, right? I'm talking about 2016, 2017. We were the only company globally they partnered with, and we would have their reviews, Facebook pages reviews come up on the Baby Chakra site, and identified, of course, as Facebook pages reviews, and then we'd have the Baby Chakra UGC reviews. So sometimes it actually helps to, kind of partner with potential competitors. I think the third thing we did was we kept our team very lean. There's a big sort of focus on saying we want large teams. India mein pata nahi why is this obsession ki badi teams banani hai, right? It just breaks down structures, it breaks down trust, it breaks down communication. At our peak, we were probably about a 70-member team, and I can tell you safely, and they've all gone on to lead large technology companies, become, very well known in their space across UI, UX, design, product, community, and content marketing. And we kept our team very lean, which is a very, very conscious decision. So I think these are the three things we did, thoda sa hatke, if you will, Rizwan, with differently. And now that I'm starting up again, I think I'm going to stick to the same principles.
Thank you very much, Naiyya. When we started Citius Tech in 2005, we wanted to position ourselves as a healthcare tech company, and it was essentially a tech services company. And obviously, all the majors, whether it's Cognizant, Infosys, Wipro, they all, even at that point, relative to what the market was, were very large companies. And how do you start a new tech services companies and be able to differentiate yourself when you already have these large guys in the market? And we basically said that if you really want to position ourselves as a healthcare tech company, we would have to do a few things very different from what traditional IT services can do in the healthcare space. So we came up with a four-pronged strategy to be able to do that. So first of all, what we said is that we are going to, do a lot of internal publishing. So every time we would do a particular project or we would do something, how do you create internal? So for example, I spent many years at McKinsey, and most consulting organizations would create practice documents. And essentially, practice documents achieve two things. One, it forces internal teams to be able to very clearly define what are the new things they learned, which can then become a source for training internally. But practice documents are also very effectively used by consulting organizations to become sort of important sales documents, right? So you are talking to a customer, you say, by the way, here are 4 practice documents that we have, is a very different caliber of conversation than do. So we said, going to do that, okay? The second thing we said is that all these practice documents are great, but we should put a target for international publications, okay? So we created a budget, and of course, as we became bigger, it became easier, but even when we were small, we said we are going to sponsor about 6 to 8 teams a year to be able to participate and publish abstracts in international publications. Yeah. And it was amazing because you are basically a software developer or whatever. It's a fairly regular job in India today, but the ability to be able to apply for to learn something new, capture the aha, apply for an abstract, and then fly to UK or US or wherever to be able to publish and get your paper accepted, and perhaps even at a conference where you go and present, is a small investment, but the return of getting 6 to 8 papers a year on a consistent basis would completely reposition how our clients felt about it. Yeah. The third thing that we did is that certification becomes important, right? So we gave very specific targets for people in the organization to get certified. So, there are some hairy standards in healthcare tech. One of them is called HL7. It's an interoperability standard and nothing terribly complicated. But we said we are going to have the maximum number of certified professionals in the world, right? So then we got a couple of 100 people certified, not expensive at all. But then that would become a core part, right? We would go to any of our clients and prospects and say, hey, by the way, we have the maximum number of certified professionals in the world. And that is, again, very tangible that people could. And the last thing, again, a little counterintuitive, when you are in the tech services business, you are taught how to convince the customer about how cost effective you are to work with because it's an outsourcing business. Yeah. We taught every sales guy that when you are asked a question on pricing, your first statement to the client has to be that we are very expensive. And that is so counterintuitive because, most sales guys say, oh my God, how can you ever say that? You'll be like booted out of the door, right? But for an organization to tell a customer as the first sentence that we are very expensive is a show of strength, yeah. And when you are able to say that confidently, of course, you can't just, it's not a trivial conversation. You have to back it up with enough capability to defend that pricing position. But if you can say that, then the customer kind of just gets a shock, right, in some ways, right? Oh my God, this guy has the audacity to tell me that they are expensive, yeah, okay? But but then you can't differentiate yourself. You can't say, hey, I'm competing with these 10 guys. I'm this better, but my pricing is 10% cheaper than all the other guys, right? That sounds hollow, yeah. But if you say I'm competing with these 10 guys, and by the way, these are all the great things we do, and we are like 20% more expensive, that's a viable proposition. Now, eventually, you will obviously discount it, and you may not get all the premium you asked for. You make it slightly smaller, but that really helped us position ourselves very differently in the market, yeah. And a combination of that then led to a lot of things. And once, in any organization, I always tell, many companies, if you can find a way to get a 10%, 15% premium on your pricing, then you are gold. But if you can't get that, right, and you are having to compete at a lower price point than your competition, then life is hell for you. Yeah. Okay. So anybody, we'll do a poll at the end. I would love to know how many of y'all are doing startups or whatever. But your single biggest goal in life should be, what do I need to do to legitimately earn a 10-15% premium over competition? Yeah. And that one thought process would like agonize. That if somebody woke me up in the middle of the night and said, what agonizes you? I said, what will it take for me to charge a 15-20% premium on competition? Yeah. So that was our unconventional way of doing it, which I thought was very effective. Yeah. I'm going to pass it on to Naiyya. We're going to kind of share the load of moderation. So Naiyya, over to you, and Mayank now for a couple of questions for us.
Yeah. So I mean, the way we discuss this is that three of us are founders, right? So we have a lot of questions as well for Rizwan. So why should he be the only moderator here? But here's the question. It's not easy to build. We know that, right? And it requires a lot of resilience. They're some of the lowest points we've experienced probably through this journey. So Rizwan, Mayank, what would you consider your lowest point in the whole journey of building that you've had? And what has that taught you? And how did you bounce back from it, more importantly?
So there was, somebody asked me this question before. The first sort of thing that jumps out with me is a breakfast meeting. And, we as a company had never raised any primary capital. And 8 years after we started, we had a term sheet with General Atlantic. They had given us, I don't know how many secondary transactions have happened, but it was a $110 million secondary transaction 8 years after we were in it. And we had the term sheet, and we were in the process of working through the agreement. And while there's usually a month between doing a handshake on your term sheet and getting the agreement signed. Yeah. And in the process of that month, 3 of my largest customers, for a variety of reasons, one related with our performance and 2 independent because they had their business challenges, basically wanted to contract their business. Yeah. And between these 3 companies, they were about 30-40+% of my revenues. It would not go to zero, but would contract. And that impacted the very significant growth momentum that we had for the next 1 or 2 years after that. It would be much more modest because of that. And there was no, these were just, many times you don't get an email saying that we are taking away your business, but you have discussions. And we were like in a really deep moral bind. As a founding team, we said, we could do nothing, and the agreement would get signed, and we would get the money in the bank. But, somehow, right, it just didn't feel right. Yeah. So we agonized about it for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Then finally, a week before we were supposed to sign the agreement, we said, you know what, this is not done. Yeah. So I organized a meeting with the then head of General Atlantic India, and it was a breakfast meeting. And I said, you guys are signing a contract in a week's time, but I have to deliver this bad news to you. And he could do one of two things. He could either back off, or he could renegotiate the price, or he could say, let's move forward. And it just the amazing company that General Atlantic is, and the honesty of the conversation on both sides, they actually went ahead with it, and finally this ended up being a really nice transaction for them as well. But it just was a really, really hard moment, because after 8 years of really building a company, when we had said no to all the other investors, and then we had this one term sheet, and then in a month's time, you're going to see a lot of money in your bank, and now you're having to have this conversation. But I was really happy that we had this conversation, and we just had a phenomenal relationship. So, when in doubt, just do what is beyond anything. There's always the human brain is very intelligent. We come up with creative ways of figuring out why we should not do the absolute right thing, which the heart knows. But when in doubt, just do the very right thing, and it plays out in the end. Yeah.
No, but on this point, I mean, while I had a different sort of point, but I just want to mention that this is a very important thing, what Rizwan just said, that look, that level of honesty, that level of being blunt, and that level of being open about bad news. They always say the bad news should travel first before the good news can reach you. So I think that culture building in the organization where bad news is celebrated, not in the context of celebrated, but at least it's encouraged by a lot of people that, look, we have to share the bad news first so that you don't end up getting the surprises, and everybody being in the same page on the bad news is definitely sort of critical. Let me just take a slightly different example to what Rizwan said. So for me, the challenging moment, Naiyya, from that context was, before COVID started, we were at about 300 employees. And 3 months into COVID, we said, now look, we have to scale and we have to rapidly move on. We moved to 1,000 employees in 3 months' time. So we hired 700 more people in 3 months' time, and they all joined remotely. So the first time it hit me that, look, about 2/3 of the organization, I have not even met them in person. I have not even seen them in person. And the entire culture started collapsing because there was no connecting sort of ecosystem, and we had to scale without sort of doing this. During COVID time, the first 2-3 months when I was not going to the office, I was standing on the desk and I was standing and working. That's the time I decided, look, the culture is going to dogs and we are not able to control how we are looking at building, and that was a tough moment for me. And that's the time when I personally decided that, look, I will extend my day from 8 a.m. to 1 a.m., but I will talk to all employees who are joining in. So I think it became a mandate that you have to connect, you have to talk, and for all leadership to sort of connect and build this through. And it's an important one because sometimes when you're scaling up very rapidly, you tend to believe that teams are coming in. I think you said it was a very small team. And I think when we ramped up, we felt, yeah, teams are coming in, it will all sort of end up coming together and sort of getting stitched together. It doesn't happen. And I think as a founder, you do need to have the last mile connect. And the more it hit me when I think we lost our first colleague to COVID. It was like a tough moment, so we had to call up the parents. I personally went and spoke to them and figured out stuff as to how to support the ecosystem. And when that stuff was going on, there was a lot of mental well-being of individual which is going through a toss because everybody was working from home. So that time it was just difficult as a founder that you're looking at growing the business, you are hiring people, and then this is happening on the other side. And then you have to call up parents who just lost a 20-year-old, 25-year-old. So that personally for me was a tough moment to sort of handle and build through. But in the process of that, I just realized that, look, whatever happened, these are things that will happen in the sort of building of the organization. But the connect that you have with the team should not go away. The moment you start losing the connect as a founder or as a CEO, then a lot of things are not in your control. It starts breaking down. And so for me, the other area beyond investor and the customer was that the fact that, look, the employee connect was, for me personally, one of the lowest points. And that to keep myself sane, I decided, look, I'll spend a lot more time talking to them over a period of.
I mean, really, I think I resonate so much with what both of you have said, and thank you for being so transparent and candid about these experiences. They're not always shared. I'll just share quickly my lowest moment. There have been many, and it's been fun sort of looking back and saying, if I can go through that, I can go through this. So it's been great. But I think for me, it was really the time, again COVID. we started, Jan 2020 with 3 term sheets. We were on top of the world. We were like, we have this beautiful J curve on our users. We'd launched products then, which I'll tell you it's not the time about, but all gangbusters, like really, really exciting start to the year. And 3 term sheets from marquee investors, really large, investments in us. And we were in that process where we are negotiating and, we had an SHA in, etc. And then, of course, COVID hit. And I remember my call from an investor, the first call, saying that, it's a very uncertain time. We'll have to probably defer, which means you're pulling back, you're not doing the investment. And I literally remember sitting down, my knees buckled, and I sat down and I just cried because there was a certain, obviously, finite pathway to our funding and to the amount of money we had in the bank as well. And then the second call came a few days later, and then, of course, it was followed by a third call. I think the toughest thing was obviously to tell the team that this has fallen through because, the team was also, obviously emotionally in a very uncertain place with all that was happening in the ecosystem and with their health and with their families. But also, all the aspiration we had, right, on what the year would look like. So we faced a really tough time at that point in time in terms of saying, okay, how do we go from one month to the other? And I really want to call out the role of the team at that point in time because we were doing all the calls virtually. And we were, we were all like sort of morale boosting each other through that very, very difficult time when we were all taking pay cuts and, things were happening on the health front for many people and their families. But, there's always a silver lining to this, right? And that in that period is when Bessemer reached out and when Darpan reached out and said, hey, what about my glam? And remember, still meeting Darpan, we both had masks on. We were sitting downstairs in his building across each other in the open so that, we couldn't infect each other with if we had anything and chatting. And I'm like, this is really interesting because this guy has the same sort of vision I have, which is content, community to commerce, but we can do it across multiple platforms. And that discussion actually, interestingly enough, is captured in a Harvard Business School case study as well on our decision to merge Baby Chakra with MyGlam and then that journey forward. And then that journey became like a unicorn and then that journey became like a very different transformational journey. Just to cut a long story short, I think there are moments in our life that really define us. And actually, if you think back, it's actually a lowest. It's the failures or the losses that define us best. So, yeah.
Okay, so just in the interest of time, I'll move from lows to little highs. Maybe the last question and then we wrap up the... I have a lot of questions that we discuss and we can sort of talk to each other. But let me not go to one more low point. Let me sort of end the conversation with a little high. So maybe just if you guys could share one of your personal anecdote, a personal sort of event or a personal sort of incident that has made you feel proud of what you have built, just so that we can understand that there are lows, but there are also some good times while building a company. So Naiyya, do you want to start off?
Many. We used to get cakes in from, we used to have like a count of Baby Chakra babies being born, so every like 2 minutes we'd see a tick, new Baby Chakra baby being born on our screens, etc. So, and we used to get birthday cakes in and photos in and very high moments. And when we launched like Serena in a JV in the US at Good Glam, it was the first time a US mainstream beauty brand had been launched by an Indian company. Big high moment for us. The ecosystem celebrated. When we launched our products, right? Baby Chakra products. Remember, we had 6 months inventory. We launched on Amazon. We were sold out in like 6 days. In fact, Amazon blocked us and said, you were doing some scam. That's why we blocked you. And we reached out to the McKinsey network and we got ourselves unblocked. We're not doing any scam. They're like, how is this happening? We're like, that's a part of community when it's, when they create the products and when they feel ownership of the products and they love the products. So I think many times when I look back, one of my most precious times though has been when one of my young engineers, this guy called Zaheen, he joined us almost like an intern. And then when we got into Google Launchpad, he got his passport made, which he hadn't anticipated he would ever need to do. So he went to get his passport made. And then he went to get his US visa done. And because he had a letter of invite from Google for the accelerator program in the Valley, he got it immediately. And I remember getting a call from his dad saying, "Beta, मैंने कभी सोचा नहीं था कि ज़हीन कभी अमेरिका देखेगा और गूगल में कुछ experience करेगा." So I think when I look back, there are stories on customers, there's stories on product market fit and J-curves and all. But eventually, the stories that also stay with me are the stories of my team and how these individuals have have kind of grown with us.
Lovely. Rizwan, you?
So, the one sort of practice I put in place, I think probably for whatever, I think probably be interesting for some of you all to know. See, when you grow as an organization, there is a natural hierarchy. Even in a non-hierarchical organization, there's hierarchy. So imagine at some point we started off as a 3-person company, then we were a couple of hundred, then we were a couple of thousand, etc., right? So there is this natural hierarchy, and what that does is that you directly never get to meet junior people because you are interacting with your one-downs, and their one-downs are interacting with their one-downs, and so on and so forth. And that's sort of naturally what happens, right? So one of the practices that I put in place was that whenever I would go for lunch in the cafeteria, okay, I would randomly select a table and have lunch. Okay.
Dangerous.
Right. This was perceived to be very dangerous by all my reportees, right, in some ways, because, I would be, for example, sitting on a table and it just coincidentally happened to be meeting up with a bunch of, 3 people for whom it was their second week in the thing, right? So, and in several of those conversations, they may not even know that I'm the CEO of the company, right? Because they were not expecting. I say, hey, can I come and join you for lunch? And they're joining. Then I start asking them. It's not an interrogation. It is not this.
Sorry,
but simple questions.
They ask you, what do you do in the organization?
Eventually they would, because I would look a little bit more senior. So other people usually are intimidated to ask. But I'm asking them questions like, hey, so when did you join? Oh, you joined 2 weeks back. How was the induction program? Who did the induction? What did you guys cover? So kuch maaya samajh mein ke nahi aaya? You're not asking them whether, otherwise you get stock answers, but you kind of probe a little bit. Or you meet somebody else, right, from some other team. You meet somebody in finance and say, hey, so how are things coming along? It was such a fascinating time that I used to have. And it would be a lot of fun because you literally randomly sat on a table that you didn't know who you were going to be having lunch with. Now, all that I used to do because it was important for me to gain the knowledge, right? But what was interesting was I didn't know how it was being perceived on the other side, right? And I only really understood that when on the day of my farewell, so I stepped down from my company 3 years back, we had a lot of people coming and talking about their experiences of engaging with Rizwan, right? 60% of the people, right, remembered the lunch that they had with me, right? So I may have done great strategy, great this, great that. That was not what they were remembering, They were remembering the random lunch meeting that day and what conversation I wouldn't have remembered, but they remembered it, right? And it was just an incredible experience. So I would just encourage whenever you all get an opportunity to randomly meet. You can't do it in a planned way because then it's organizational, oh, you are spending more time with people in this team, or you are closer to this team, or you like this better, you are spending more time with guys and more time with, it becomes all that, right? But when everybody in the organization knows, randomly you may get a chance to have lunch with Rizwan, I think it was a very good experience for me. Yeah.
Lovely. No, so multiple sort of incidents. So I think one I remember during the COVID time, it was sort of one moment where it was only me and the head of finance who used to come to the office for some reason. I don't know why 2 of us would come to office, but we thought that we are the ones who are driving everything, but we were the least important people in the organization. So then he kept a piece of document and I signed the document and I said, okay, just here's a document. Then I realized that was a term sheet that we were signing. I said, look, this is the first time we are getting valued at $1 billion plus. It was a very, very sort of I would say nonchalant moment. Nobody sort of realized anything. We're just sort of walking around. I said, there's a document, just Numa, move on. Then he said, no, Mayank, but this is the first time we're doing a $1 billion plus check. Look, while the conversation is about unicorn, I just want to mention one more thing, that these are mythical characters. They don't exist. So these are made to believe characters. But that was one moment that made us feel that, look, I think we're doing something good. But for me, the best moments come when you meet a student who has gone through the program. And I met one lady who was single mother, was sort of raising her daughter alone, and went through a very bad sort of separation in the process. And when she was doing the program, she would send very long emails, and people would read the emails as feedback and so on and so forth. And then one email she mentioned to us that, look, I cracked a job. I got one of my sort of jobs, and I was able to afford, there's a custom in Tamil Nadu, where you have to sort of, when the girl reaches a certain age, there's a ceremony that you need to do for that, that I was able to afford money to host that ceremony. And for her, that was the pinnacle moment in her own sort of life. So we just felt that while you're doing whatever you're doing, some people's life get impacted, whether it's a colleague, whether it's an investor, or an employee, or a customer. And those are the most highest point for most of us. And I think I completely resonate with what Rizwan and Naiyya said. These are not planned events. These are completely random and serendipitous. And hopefully in the process of being in serendipity, we build a mythical character which nobody has seen, nobody has observed, but it's still celebrated.
And the thing which and I'm going to open it up for Q&A, so anybody has some questions, please feel free to put up your hand. When all said and done, it doesn't matter whether you get a big check or a small check. At the end of the day, we all get used to whatever is the balance, and you don't wake up every morning thinking about your bank balance. But the number of people you touch and the number of relationships you create, and the impact that you can have on people and they have on you, they last for a very, very long time. And that beyond everything, right? To me, what is most gratifying is Naiyya mentioned about employee getting an opportunity to go to Google, and somebody sort of doing really well in their career within the company, outside the company is really a matter of detail beyond a certain point. I think it's just a really, really sort of gratifying experience. Yeah. So with that, I'm going to take any questions that somebody may have. I can see one hand up there. Vivek has a question.
Right, so in interest of time, we'll keep 3 questions for the mythical character. So let's start with the first one here.
Thanks, panel. I'm Vivek Mohile. I'm a trainer and mindfulness coach. And full circle moment for me, like for ma'am, being Rizwan's classmate, having had the experience of asking him a lot of questions about courses, which he always has good answers to because he was a class topper, to now in a panel asking him a question after 30 years is an amazing moment. So my question is, heard very nice things from you about focusing on employees and customers and honesty and so on. On the flip side, startups have often been accused of very often chasing scale at the cost of customer experience and quality, or employee experience, as in toxicity of work culture and so on. It's not that the startup founder would have that as an intention, but maybe pressure from the VCs, pressure from the other investors and so on. It might happen that that culture doesn't percolate down. So at the middle management level, they're taking the wrong decisions because somehow let's get this quarter with this scale. And so on. So as startup founders, how do you balance that? You need scale, but you have to do the things right. And what are the mistakes to avoid in that is my question.
I'll keep it simple. If you're the founder and you're the CEO of the company, I'd love to get Mayank and Naiyya's perspective as well. I don't think you can say, oh, I didn't do it and somebody reporting to me did it. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, most organizations have enough checks and balances to kind of, even if you don't pick it up on day one, right? If there is a manager reporting to you or part of your team that is not being nice to people or is doing shortcuts in engineering or whatever else, right? Information will flow through. And how you as a leader will react to that information, will you turn a blind eye, or will you softly manage it, or will you really be tough and saying this is not okay, right? I think will define how future managers, there is a very strong organizational memory, right? So once you do something a couple of times in a certain way, then organization learns, oh, this is okay and this is not okay, is sort of the way I would answer it. But Mayank and Naiyya?
I think the one thing I would definitely mention that the buck stops at you. You cannot blame the investor, you cannot blame the employee, you cannot blame anybody. People from outside can say that you got pressurized, but look, you took the call of bringing the investor. If you did not want to do what they were asking, or you could not push them back, I think the buck stops at you. But having said that, the only one thing that I feel as founders or as sort of promoter of the company that one can do is essentially be in touch with the teams. I think that connect cannot just disappear, whether you do it in a structural way or in an unstructured way, but that connect has to be there till the last mile. And even till now, when I go to office, I do walk across the aisle and meet with people. So I think that connect, you can't let it go. And the culture is a function of who you are. If the culture has gone toxic, I don't think the founders can not be blamed for that.
I couldn't agree more. I think the buck stops it is exactly the phrase I was going to use as well. So, but Mayank, of course, we both use similar, we have very similar thoughts on certain things. But, I think of organizations as communities, really, Vivek. And you probably know this best. But, when you walk into this setting, we behave a certain way, right? We wear formals, we come and we sit, we don't talk while I'm talking, or when somebody else is talking, I'm not talking, right? There's certain norms that get set into place. Because certain expectations come from what we observe around us. Or for instance, you walk into a party, right? You're expected to be a little bit more social and talk and let your hair down and, behave a certain way. It's very similar in organizations. What norms, what culture, what kind of a community that organization has, right? It's set by the initial founding team and in particular by the founder. So I could not emphasize more, the buck stops at the founder. And it is on us to set the right norms, the right ways of working, the right ways of behaving, and the right ways of interacting by just doing it ourselves, actually, in the first place.
Right, thank you. Beautiful answers. Let's go to the second question.
Okay.
Hi,
We
guys.
will take one more question because in the interest of time. And I have something to add to that answer. How to balance scaling and company culture and ethics is something we'll cover in the next panel, which is the Fast and the Furious. So do join in at 2:30 post-lunch. Thanks.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much. This is extremely insightful, all your backgrounds and stories. Just to connect with the theme of the conference, which is the artificial intelligence and the technology, I would love for you guys to just put in perspective for all of us as to what do you see as the opportunities and threats for your own particular business, and then potentially just lay it out for all this audience who may or may not actually be at the same stage and age for like your business as to what they should be thinking about in terms of when they are looking at their businesses.
So you should remember that now all of us have new businesses than the one which has been positioned here. So Naiyya, why don't you go first? Yeah.
So it's a great question, very topical actually to what we're building right now. And we're kind of literally like, I think a month and a half or 2 months into ideating on our business, a new business, right? I think something Mayank and I have discussed in the past, is it possible to build in the next 3 years a one-person unicorn? Because that is the level of, I think, just ability generative AI gives us from both an operational, a strategic, as well as an execution point of view in building out companies, right? To give you a sense of what we are doing, one is, of course, like while we have a small team in the new company, we actually have 2 team members who are actually agents. And they are part of our team meetings. They're giving us information on the go. They're kind of prioritizing information, creating our materials, etc., as we speak. So that's one piece to it. So on the operating piece. The second is we are actually building out and reimagining how new age consumer appliances could be. So that's the business I'm building out right now. Even in the design and in terms of the way we are kind of building in consumer insighting and design, we're using a lot of stable diffusion models to actually accelerate product velocity, right? And the third thing that we're doing is in the go-to-market in terms of the consumer insighting, in terms of like understanding like the different platforms and channels, be it Amazon, be it Shopify, be it offline retailers, right? A lot of the data that's coming in, as well as the back-end data, we're actually using, pretty, of course, like basic tools on web, like scraping, etc., but like also like trying to figure out the right tools which integrate into these platforms and give us insights into where these trends can go. And therefore, when we launch our products in a certain geography, are we poised well from a price, positioning, performance perspective as well?
Mayank?
I'm just eating into the lunchtime, so I'm very quick. So if you're not using it, then you're missing out completely. I think that's the short answer to AI. I guess in education, there are multiple use cases, but one that we are most excited about is these situational training. So as a person who's joining as a sales agent or as a person who's becoming a nurse in Germany, etc. So how do you create that situational training for those guys and create that sort of conversational stuff going on? Internal productivity, Naiyya touched upon a whole lot. And I think there are endless use cases. But here, my view there is that, look, you need to know what problem you're solving for from a UX or / customer or the consumer or various stakeholders perspective, and then figure out how AI can solve for it versus starting with AI as AI cannot be the hammer. You have to find first the nail and then find the hammer to sort of hit it and get it right in the process. So I think knowing the problem is the starting point, and then there will be use cases in which AI can help solve for that.
So I don't know the answer on a lighter note. That's why I run a not-for-profit now. Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. This was a fun conversation. Really appreciate it.
I'd request the panel to stay here for 2 more minutes for photographs, as well as we would like to present you with a token of appreciation for your time, for all the valuable insights, and for all the guidance that you've shared with our team here. So I'd like to invite Saurabh sir to the stage to help present the token of appreciation.